testing the popular Indian dish, poha. Hello everybody, I am testing an Indian favorite, and that is chicken tikka. The most popular tea in India, masala chai. I am having the dal tadka. I'm eating 2 paneer parathas.
Hi, welcome to Fitness Forward. My name is Sonia Lulla. If you follow fitness influencers on Instagram, you would have noticed that they promote the use of a device called the CGM, or the Continuous Glucose Monitoring Units. A CGM helps a user understand their blood sugar levels throughout the entire day. It is especially useful in understanding how a certain meal affects their sugar levels and the kind of response it elicits. But what do these spikes indicate? Does it matter if the sugar level spikes up and comes back to baseline? What does it suggest for you if you are on a weight loss program? If you are active and train regularly, does it matter? To answer these questions, we have a very special guest with us today. Kris Gethin is the founder of Kate Supplements and the owner of a chain of franchisee gyms by his own name. Kris is best known to moviegoers in India as the man who helped Hrithik Roshan get in a ship shape for Krish 3. He is back in the city to train the actor again for his next film, Fighter. During his time spent in the city, Kris has been indulging in a very unique experiment. He's been sampling Indian foods and has been testing these foods on his CGM to understand the kind of glucose response his body elicits. In this video, he's going to talk about the nutritional aspects of these foods, the kind of reaction it elicits for him on his CGM, and how these findings can help you and me make smarter choices. Hi Kris, thank you for joining us today. It's really nice to have you here.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
So you have been in India a couple of times now. You've obviously been aware of the fitness lifestyle within the country. If I have to ask you, what is your immediate understanding of the approach to fitness and to nutrition in India?
It's definitely growing. The expansion of the knowledge here has evolved over the past few years that I've noticed since I came here first. As an example, I'm staying in Juhu. When I used to walk at the beach at like 6 o'clock in the morning, because I get up early, there'd be nobody down there. Now at 6 o'clock in the morning, I see lots of people walking down there. So I think people are becoming a little bit more health conscious. They're being a little bit more educated in this space, and obviously activity has been a part of it. So I can see the evolution is definitely growing. The awareness is there.
Now, you've obviously been sampling a lot of Indian foods, and these are literally meals that we have on a daily basis. So whether that's the poha, the upma, the dosas, these are very staple Indian meals that we have. And I know that you've been testing them on your CGM. For the layman, Kris, who doesn't understand what these spikes indicate, how would you explain what these sugar spikes indicate, and why should they be bothered if it spikes up, comes back to normal?
Yeah, it's not so much the spike as opposed to how long that spike stays up, and based on that individual. If, like, for instance, I'm not insulin resistant, I'm very insulin sensitive. So if I test it on my CGM and I see a big spike and it stays there a while, I know it's generally going to be worse for the majority of the people that may be inactive, insulin resistant, possibly pre-diabetic, and following a very hard carb heavy meal every single day, because a lot of the nutrition here in India is carb heavy without the protein. So it is, you don't want to have too many of those spikes, and you definitely don't want them too high for too long, because that could cause insulin resistance and probably, possibly pre-diabetes.
So I know you spoke about adding the importance of adding protein to every meal. Now I know that in India we talk a lot about the amount of protein, carbs and fats that you should have, but the importance on adding protein with a carb heavy meal is not really spoken about enough. So can you speak about what a protein does to a carb heavy meal? Like, how does it prevent the spike?
Yeah, for sure. Now, a lot of people think bodybuilders are only the ones that should be consuming protein. Everybody should be consuming a form of protein. It's your body building blocks to your hair, to your skin, to your organs, to your eyesight, your nails, everything. So you need to have adequate protein to support that. Now, having protein with the carbohydrates will help mitigate some of the damage of that carbohydrate spike. If you add protein to it, it will bring that spike down. So as an example, if I have eggs with my oats in the morning, the spike isn't as bad as if I have oats by itself. even though oats is pretty good, that's a good breakfast, but it will bring it down. So I do encourage anybody that has a form of carbohydrate, they have some form of protein that's a clean source added to it.
And can you speak about the importance of fats in a diet?
Yeah, fats, of course. You should have healthy fats. Unfortunately, we live in a society, not just here, around the world, where we have a lot of pro-inflammatory fats, omega-6s, especially in factory farmed foods, and we don't generally, and fried foods and canola oil and refined seed oils. We need to eliminate all of that, and we need to have more of the healthier fats, the omega-3s coming from your nuts, your seeds, your avocados, your egg yolks, your olive oil, as opposed to your deep fried foods.
I know that for someone who maybe isn't active or who doesn't train or who doesn't even maybe watch their calorie consumption in a day, I mean, the spike, it will obviously give them an understanding of where they're going wrong. But what is the effect on someone who does train? So say for someone who is active, who does go to the gym, what is his, what should his perception of, glucose spikes in his reading suggest?
Again, you shouldn't just go too high, because it doesn't matter if you are an active individual. Too many of these insulin spikes can still cause pre-diabetes, and you can still add fat. Like 130, if I go by the number 130, anything over that is my danger zone. I'm an active person. I hold a lot of muscle. I'm insulin sensitive. So I'm still very cautious that I don't go over that, or I can add a lot of fat and I'm not going to do any favors to my health.
Can you talk to us about the fact that how much is a reading for you going to differ from someone else? So I know that a certain meal might give you an insulin spike and may not give it to someone else. So can we define some things about every meal based on a general assumption, or do we know that something works for someone or doesn't work for someone else?
Well, yeah, I'd say a general assumption, because like I said, I've tested this with other people around me who are generally smaller than me. They're not as active as me, even if they're Indian and they've been brought up on these foods. When I test and look at their blood glucose response compared to mine, theirs is generally much higher than mine. And that's why I'm doing these tests, to show, look, beware. If I'm getting this spike off this particular food, the chances are your spike is going to be much worse. However, I've noticed, for instance, if I have rice, I don't get that much of a spike. If I have like sweet potato, I get more of a spike. However, someone else might have that in reverse role. So everybody's different how they accept a certain food.
Right. So I suppose that's really then testing each one. Like everyone needs to go through the process of seeing how a CGM works for them.
Yeah, that's why the first time I started running a CGM was in 2017, to test to see what sort of response I'd have from certain foods. And I would test different things like cold thermogenesis, such as having an ice bath in the morning before the rest of the day. And I found that my blood sugar spikes were much less. I had much more blood sugar stability if I started my day with an ice bath. So those were all experiments that I was trying back then.
With the same diet that you were following?
Same diet. Yeah, I eat the same thing every day. I'm only doing a lot of these foods while I'm here. Like if I'm in Italy, I'll test those foods. If I'm in Mexico, I'll test those foods. And while I'm here in India, I want to test the foods and educate people on, the response. I'm not here to tell you what to do and what not to do. I just want to give out my findings, and you make your own unbiased decision what you do.
Can you talk to our viewers, Kris, about what is an ideal way of, is there an order that you recommend on how people should consume their protein, carbs and fats?
Yes.
Okay, can you speak about that?
So I always ask people to consume their protein first on the plate. Some people mash their food all together. Go for the food and then go for your carbohydrates and finish with your fats. Okay. That seems to be the best protocol. Or you can have the fats before the carbohydrates, but always start with your protein and try to finish with your carbohydrates if possible.
Do you think you can help us understand the science behind that a little bit?
Yeah, so if you have carbohydrates, so carbohydrates is your body's preferred fuel source. It'll always grab the carbohydrates and turn it into glycogen and into sugar, into energy first, always. If you put protein in there first, it can still take energy from protein or from fats. It's just not the preferred carbs, the preferred energy source. So if it starts pulling from these first, it doesn't pull so much from the carbohydrates into your bloodstream to give you that spike. It's more steady.
I kind of, perceive the Indian diet, Kris, I feel that it's very heavy in carbs, and I think there's a real lack of protein that we have in our diet. Considering the fact that India is going to be the diabetes capital of the world, what do you think, based on your interaction with people, do you think there's any other mistake that people are making when it comes to their eating habits?
Yeah, it's a lot of sugars. There's definitely a lot of sugars. You know, if I visit the coffee houses here, there's people ordering more cakes, or they look like sundaes. They're shakes as opposed to coffees. You know, if I look at one of those drinks that's about 800 calories, a lot of it is sugar. That's not going to fulfill someone. They're not going to feel like they've had a meal. It's just going to cause a craving, a blood sugar crash, so they're going to have less energy, which creates more addiction to sugar. So that's one of the other problems that I see here. And a lot of, you know, unfortunately, the westernized world has influenced India with these refined seed oils. You know, like down in the south of India in the 1940s, one of the areas there was considered a blue zone where people live into a disproportionate age. We had centenarians. Now that has one of the shortest lifespans. And that's because we've been influenced by, you know, the deep fried foods. It's not so natural anymore. Like if you think of our grandparents, a lot of the foods that they ate were completely natural. Now you look at a label on a lot of these foods, I can't even pronounce them. Yeah. So the body's probably not going to recognize it. And it just becomes a toxic buildup at the end of the day. And, you know, we live in a very different environment that we did like 60, 70 years ago. Our DNA hasn't changed, but we're having more complications. It's become a very comfortable world. You know, we can get things on Uber Eats or we can get things delivered. We've got Netflix. It's a very easy world, but we're becoming sicker and sicker. And I think it's because of the convenience factor. And we should look at the inconvenience of, you know, creating our own foods from scratch with natural ingredients.
What do you think we have very good with our Indian diets?
I'd say what's very good is basically not as much fast food. Like if I'm in the US, every mile I probably pass about 10 fast food joints. So, you know, it's a Taco Bell, a McDonald's, a Burger King, KFC, whatever. I don't see as much of that here, thank God. So hopefully that influence won't grow too much here. So there are a lot more natural foods that are made from scratch as opposed to the fast foods that you generally see overseas. And the other thing that I really like about this culture here is that it's very family orientated. Everybody gets together, the families connect with each other, that social interaction, where I see that overseas in several countries as a big disconnect. And by studying the blue zones, you know, these different parts around the world where you have a lot of centenarians, one of the things that they've shown that is apparent in all of these blue zones around the world is the family connection, the social interaction, that community of belonging, where in a lot of places now, like especially in the US, in the UK, you don't have that as much. People seem to go online and do their social interaction instead.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you so much for joining us today, Kris. Really nice talking to you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Subscribe to Midday India. Get direct notifications on all our videos by clicking on the bell icon.